Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be doing an episode of the Q&A as a little addendum to the news video I did yesterday. I said before I'd even really got to play or experience it because the patch had just come out that we could get access to the Heart of Thorns beta from getting loot items dropping in Silver Waste and Drytop. My hunch was, knowing ArenaNet, knowing everything that their game is about, it kind of sounded like it shouldn't be too difficult of a drop rate. A lot of people have been saying actually that it's been hours and hours and hours of grinding, like 5 hours, and they've come out empty, which is very, very shocking to me. What they might do is up the rates as the week goes along, but that is certainly a shock, and we'll see how that goes as things continue. But yeah, it may actually be a bit harder, and so if anyone just sort of watched that video yesterday and they're kind of quite casually thinking, oh, I'll do it over the weekend or something, just consider the drop rates are a bit lower than I was presuming they would be myself. Now, that's not a problem for me, but I play the game quite a lot. Maybe you don't so much. Anyway, so moving on to the questions, pulling questions from the bonus Q&A. We did 2 back-to-back last week. This actually comes from the most recent. If you want your questions to appear in a future video, just leave them down below as I'm talking here, and that's where I'll be looking for the next episode. First one comes from Minda, who says, did it take you long to be able to explain things so well on the fly? I'm trying to learn to talk smoother for better videos, and I can talk well in conversations, but when I'm recording something, I have to say things over again a lot. Maybe it comes with time, or maybe I just need to borrow your accent. Actually, I am not as smooth as the videos might make you think. For one thing I did get very good at over my years of doing this is editing audio tracks so that it sounds seamless, even though I completely fucked up what I was talking about. So there are certain words that I can cut together very, very well, and you would never be able to tell as an end user that I've actually spliced 2 completely different sentences together. For example, the word because. A lot of the time, if you ever hear me say because in a video, the B sound is possibly from a completely different sentence I was saying a whole minute earlier to the cause sound of that same word, and it splices 2 sentences together seamlessly, and this way I get rid of ums and ers and messing things up. It's actually a really interesting psychological thing you can look into, but you find a lot of YouTubers can, when they get used to cutting a lot, begin to use it as a crutch, and they will mess up frequently and kind of allow themselves to. I've actually watched a few YouTubers before who have talked openly about this idea, particularly vloggers who will sit there with a camera in front of themselves. You notice some cut like every word. There was a pretty big video that went on about the Baltimore rioting recently, where a guy was sat down talking about it, but he was cutting like every single word, like even twice a word sometimes, and you can really get cut into this. And it's people, they say a sentence and then they'll think, oh, I didn't quite say that right, and then they'll say a sentence, and that they'll say a sentence, that they'll say a sentence over and over and over again, and eventually they'll just pick one of those. So it's much less obvious with me because I don't do face cam stuff, which is pretty useful, but I have been trying a lot to cut that out, and really all you can do is force yourself to roll with your initial sentence, even if there's a horrible or a horrible in it, or you completely messed up the pronunciation with something. You have to convince yourself to keep going. And what I'll find in my videos is some days I'll be totally on the ball, and because I start nailing it early, I find it very easy to continue rolling with what I'm saying. This whole question, except just a second ago, I've done in one take here, which is pretty good. But unless you can really force yourself to do that, you can end up doing lots and lots of cuts, and then I'll notice I'll go through patches where there's loads that I'm ending up doing this. I would say if you want the purest form of me, if you really want to see my eloquence in its true nature, you would probably do best looking at visual wood. When you're recording a podcast, you can't stop in the middle, and it's just a conversation with another person. And you'll know that you can psychologically do it because you can hold a conversation with someone else without stuttering constantly. And the second I'm on the podcast and I've got Matt there, I can talk about the game very smoothly, and it's literally just tricking your brain into different modes. It's a really interesting subject. Anyway, I fall to it as well. I'm not as smooth as you might think I am, and often a lot of prep goes in videos too. Like, if you give me a random subject about Guild Wars 2, I wouldn't be able to just spill out tons and tons of information about it. I will give myself bullet points, and they might just be vague words that I know what they mean, so it's not like I write out whole sentences verbatim that then I'm going to read, but, you know, I will have cues for myself, certainly. So, anyway, the next question, actually about GW2, is from Paradigm Fang. who says, what do you believe in ArenaNet's future is for Guild Wars 2 expansions and possibly continents? Pretty generic question, but they go on to say, it was always my belief that they would add one expansion per Elder Dragon before we visit any other continent. I believe everything they're expanding on for Heart of Thorns is still building up their core game before we head to another completely new continent. A new continent seems like multiple expansions worth of content when you compare it to the bar they're setting for Heart of Thorns. And this is a really good point. This is one of those things where I think, oh god, yeah, Heart of Thorns is so small in scope. It just feels so small. I am hopeful for the future after Heart of Thorns to have expansions that cover a lot more ground. Now, they've said before that Heart of Thorns as an expansion is more feature-sided, okay? So we're looking at a lot of big feature changes. This is them finding their feet for masteries, for specializations, for guild halls, for the way they're adding new professions and stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure we'll have a question about this soon, that we're not going to get any more professions after this, and it'll probably just be races. Like, it's finding their feet, and I hate that we're coming up on 3 years after the game's out, and we're still sort of in this mode where we're saying, oh, you know, it'll be better in the future, they're just finding their feet. But unfortunately, I do still very much believe that to be the case. So I think Heart of Thorns is going to put a lot of these core features in, and you're right, when you say that Heart of Thorns is about expanding the core game, that's true not just in terms of geography, but it's true in terms of the features as well. I also am now a big fan of the thought that we're not actually going to go to those other continents until we deal with the Elder Dragons that are established. I really do think that the next expansion could deal with multiple Elder Dragons at once, and will be a lot more ground. We might not just get one region on the next expansion, we'll get a few. You know, think about it. Once Heart of Thorns is done, now that they know what they're doing, they can hit the ground running very quickly. They can know straight away what they want to do, how many regions they're going to add. If they do go for like a 1.5 year release cycle, as I'm thinking is the sweet spot, that's plenty of time for them to add more than just, you know, the Maguma region. We could get the Far Shiver Peaks and the Crystal Desert and the Verdant Cascades all at once, you know, in one X-Pack. And then the one after that could then pretty much fill in the rest of the blanks, right? Except maybe the Deep Sea Dragon, and then we may have cause to go to the other continents. That's what I think they're really doing, so it might be disappointing, and to me it's also disappointing. I still want to go back to Alona, I want to go back to Cantha. There's also the possibility we could get snippets of those continents, in small missions, flashbacks, kind of style thing, bonus mission, in essence, stuff. But the actual full new, massive, explorable continent, I mean, if you look at the bar that they've given for Heart of Thorns, it's like we're now talking about a super expansion, you know? And I just think they'll be a while away, really, and that's going to be disappointing. I do think the #1 thing that ArenaNet will get flack about for this expansion, the #1 thing by far that you can already see people are worried about, is the size of the expansion. I think this expansion is going to be too small for most of us, and that's a sad fact. Moving on, from Ramoth Mizpah, who says, don't know if you've talked about this before, but what do you think about the likelihood of the Shrine of Balthazar from Guild Wars 1, buried deep in the Maguma jungle, will reappear? With all the sudden Balthazar stuff, the knowledge of the Shrine, Ritlock's disappearance, and even the Chaos skins, I feel we're being prepared for some Balthazar content in Heart of Thorns, maybe even the Fissure of Woe. Maybe that's where Ritlock went to learn to be a Revenant, and that's why he explains why he reappears there in the jungle from that Shrine. Great theory, love it. There is so much. The Balthazar weapons are coming. We just got a Balthazar outfit, by the way, which fits very flashly with the Balthazar back skin. We also got fairly recently-ish with the introduction of the PvP reward tracks. Yes, we've got the Chaos weapons came in the game, and those were things that were dropping from the Fissure Row, not exclusively. But yeah, there is certainly a lot of Balthazar-based stuff. We have the hints here as well that there could be some kind of hardcore content coming to Guild Wars 2. They've not talked much about it. I really think we could be getting Fissure of Woe, guys. I really think, especially when you like read a comment like this, it's like everything just fits so perfectly. So the idea is Ritlock travels to the Mist to try and reclaim his sword, and he is spewed back into the world, yeah, at this Temple of Balthazar. Maybe this is where we happen upon him. What a great, great, great idea. What did he find while he's there? There are some very interesting questions if we do suddenly say, oh, Fissure of Woe is going to be a thing. Guild Wars 2 set up that there could be stuff going on in the Underworld, because there's like hints that stuff is flowing out of the Underworld. Why does the Shadow Behemoth exist? Why are those Atke and stuff in Kessex Hills nearby, near God's Lost Swamp? They're kind of suggesting that the Underworld has got some issues going on. Grenth doesn't have full control over it anymore, and stuff is spewing out. So they set that up, but they haven't really talked anything about what's going on in the Fissure of Woe. When we last saw the Fissure of Woe for Guild Wars 2 players, this was the realm of Balthazar, one of the gods of men, or many interior, I suppose, and he was at eternal war with his half-brother Menzies, who had his shadow army, and they were fighting one another there. What is going on? What is the state of Menzies now? GW1 saw a lot of updates go into the Underworld and the introduction of Doom as an actual boss fight we could encounter. Will we be fighting Menzies, interacting with him, or... Very exciting, and if this is also the hardcore content, it could really sate the appetite of both lore enthusiasts and people looking for hardcore stuff. Really, really cool. Moving on, Soyce the Man says, do you think the reason for making blasting staff as base is simply because ArenaNet couldn't fix the bug, which actual area of AoE and ground target circle never matched for old Ellies? No, I don't. I mean... Yeah, it's cool that you've pointed out, yes, this bug was a thing, but it really wasn't a big deal now, was it? I don't think that this is why they fixed this. I think this is because it makes sense for Ellie. Like, if they decided at some point, okay, we have 3 Elementalist traits that all affect weapons that Elementalists are using. Their main hand weapons. They're daggers, their scepters, their staves. They're all currently loaded in the arcane line, and we're thinking of adding an elite specialization that's going to give them a new weapon. So already there's a bit of an imbalance there, because the new elite specialization is going to have one weapon trait while arcane's going to have the other. Is it really fun to put this option in like all the adept slot? Like when I was trying to predict what they were doing with the traits, I did conceive of the idea of having the arcane line where in the adept slot you choose what weapons you have. Is this a staff build? Is this a scepter build? Is this a dagger main hand build? And that sounds kind of cool conceptually, but then you think actually really it just means that all staff builds who are specializing arcane, they have no real choice here. It's just brain dead, and that's not what's fun about the trait system. What's fun about it is having difficult decisions and then getting identity in your build based on those difficult decisions you made. So they couldn't all fit in the same adept slot, so then how did you filter them out throughout the class? It wasn't fun. So if they decided then at that point that they didn't want the weapon traits, but they knew that a lot of Elementalists really liked and even relied on blasting staff in some situations, why not make it baseline? You know, if they'd already made that decision too from other classes. I believe that's why they did it. I really doubt the bug even came into their minds. You know what? I think a lot of devs aren't even aware of the amount of bugs that are still out there with their classes, because otherwise, hey, they might have been fixed. This was a very minor one anyway. But yeah. Next question is from Lady Sula, who says, now that we have some specialization tidbits, how excited are you to be able to run 3 Grandmaster traits on your Ellie at one time, depending on what makes the cut? I know I'm super excited about it. This is funny because I've always been very excited by this idea. But actually, now that we have the system in place, I'm not that excited for Elementalists in particular, because a lot of the things I really wanted to run together were things that kind of had synergy among themselves. So a great example in Air, okay, is the 3 Grandmasters. You had Fresh Air, which I really wanted. I felt like, and still feel like, a Scepter build, you don't run without Fresh Air anymore. Like, it's just integral to that build. But then there were 2 others. There was one that was, oh, if you CC someone, they get lightning struck and they take weakness. And the other one's, if people are CC'd, you take more damage. Wouldn't it be really cool if you could have both? Don't these have great synergy? And actually, under the new system, they've allowed you to have both and pick both and have that cool synergy. So that's there. But there's many other situations, too, where I've just wanted multiple in the same line. So Earth, I wanted like a rock solid, like almost impossible to kill Elementalist tank for PvP bunking, okay? And so I would often look at the Earth line, and now we've got this really interesting split of where it's like, okay, do you want to be better at tanking against Condis and take Diamond Skin? Diamond Skin, by the way, is something I never mentioned in my video, but because of the increase in build purity that we will be seeing once the amulets are rebalanced and once many of these random traits aren't being thrown around anymore, Diamond Skin is actually getting a buff. Like, nothing has changed about the trait itself, but because of the environment of Guild Wars 2, it's getting a buff. So for people that don't know, Diamond Skin is an Elementalist Earth trait that means while you're above 90% health, you are immune to conditions. And so it was kind of a cool trait, but as soon as, and it meant that in some very rare situations currently in game, you could just hard bunk against like a Necro that was coming at you. It was a pure Condi Necro. But most characters and builds had that little bit of pure, just raw power in there, and if they pushed you under that 90% threshold, often they could keep you below it, and then you're in Disaster Town, and then the trait is basically functionless. Especially in team fights and stuff, it was basically functionless. But now, because builds are going to be a much more pure, Condi builds won't have that random power in essence, I guess, unless the base abilities are still applying reasonable flat damage. We might actually see Diamond diamond skin is going to get some kind of a buff. Anyway, like, you had that trait, and then you had immune to critical hits while in Earth achievement. Wouldn't it be awesome to be able to run both? You know, I even conceived a long time ago, and this would never work, but I conceived of like a Grandmaster that allowed you to take multiple Grandmasters in another line. So it's like, you don't get a Grandmaster from this line, but in exchange you get 2 from the same line, and then you could have these crazy synergies. Obviously that stuff's not possible, so it's going to be cool to get 3, and it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, a full Arcane, full Water, full Earth Ellie, but I think really it's in other classes that we're going to see that multiple Grandmaster thing truly shine. Next question is from Tippertot, who says, what do you think of the idea of, as we traverse the underground forest floor areas of the Maguma, coming across tribes or civilizations of Asura who never evacuated to the surface? I'd love to see how they might have found ways to work around or even utilize Primordis' influence. The reason I picked this question is because this gave me an interesting perspective on the underground biome that I didn't really have before. And that's that it could be like the depths of Tyria. It could be dungeons and actual deep caverns and stuff. I wasn't really thinking of it as that way. I was thinking of it as the surface of Tyria. It's just it feels very dark and dank and menacing and threatening and gloomy and shadowy because of all of the plant life that's around there, and you know that it's just crawling with the horrible Mordrum infested minions and even just dangerous wildlife at the best of times. That's what I thought of it, and very little light, you know, managed to reach down there. But now you're kind of telling me, oh wow, there could be caves as well. I really don't think we're going to meet long lost Asura civilizations that never interacted with that never like evacuated. I don't think they'll do that. I think eventually we might get that when we go to the true depths of Tyria again. You know, the places where we'll meet dwarves as well, still fighting Primordis. We'll maybe meet discover what happened with Rata 10, that was the mysterious extra Asura place out in the Shiver Peak Mountains. These could be interesting ideas, but I actually don't think we'll get that as a part of the Heart of Maguma biomes. I just think this is going to be deep underground, lots of water and bogs and lush, I guess, even nice clean enchanted waters like we saw in Guild Wars 1. Next question, Ian in Lesbian says, hey WP, how are you, elegant and always? Do you believe that Zin's secret underground lair will be in Heart of Thorns and thus lead to more information on the Inquest founder? So this was a little thing I talked about in Jungle Tour 3, which I did this week, but one thing I never touched on at all is, yes, the thought that Zin could have something to do with the founder of the Inquest. You know, outside of like Kudu, those high levels of Inquest are still, there's a lot of mystery about them. And so this is a really great thought. You know, we have all these very extensive stories about the founding of the Nightmare Corps, even the Sons of Svarnir to an extent. Human personal story stuff connects bandit stuff to the White Mantle, and obviously the Flame Legion are very well established. But the Inquest have always had this secrecy about them. And to connect it to Zin is very interesting too, because Zin was kind of a member of a trio of characters in the end, okay? Zin was a very powerful, decent Golomancer in GW1, and he interacted a lot with Blim and Livia. Blim and Livia both have incredibly detailed stories accounting for their lives after the events of Guild Wars 1. Blim has, you know, story about how he became a really great Golomancer himself. He started dabbling with necromancy and Golomancy, which itself is pretty interesting considering he seems to have hung out with Livia a lot, who herself may have become a lich, been blessed with immortal life, as we know. And then, like, even he ended up being buried in Kryta with a grave, like an actual tombstone and a grave, like a human would have been, much unlike, you know, many other Asura. So they went into a lot of detail with both of these characters. But what about Zin? Why did Zin seem to just mysteriously disappear and fall off the face of the story? Even though I believe there's an ascended trinket that refers to him, like Zin's Data Crystal or something in Guild Wars 2. Is that because they went their separate ways and he ended up founding something else also quite massive and became I mean, Zin is like the perfect kind of character to have been at the beginning of the Inquest, right? If you guys don't know who Zin is, but you've seen the cartoon show Invader Zim, Zin was an Asura who was basically like a spoof or a parody almost of that character in that cartoon show, which is a great show, by the way. So yeah, like he was this evil maniacal guy. That would be great. And so yes, now maybe because we're going back to the Falls, we might see MOX again, but we might also get more information on the Inquest. Another big thing about the Asura that maybe slightly off topic of the question, but, you know, in Guild Wars 2, we had Zaitan at launch, and Zaitan was kind of sort of opposing humans or did a lot of devastation. You know, it was the human nation of Or that he was residing in. It was the human nation of Kryta and Lion's Arch that got flooded and then ended up being rebuilt as a multicultural location, but ultimately, you know, it felt more human-centric. And so many of the dragons seem to pair quite nicely against various races, and of course, Morgemoth would pair nicely against Sylvari. But actually, proximity-wise, in all honesty, the Asura are the ones closest. And when you look at the story of how the Elder Dragons lust for magic, and you look at the fact that to be Asura is to have a great understanding of magic and to utilize magic in the very stone with which your buildings are constructed, yeah, I think, you know, the Asura might be seriously a threat here. Like, I think it would be really cool. We had the battle for Lion's Arch in Guild Wars 2 at launch. We may have the battle for Rata Sum. And wouldn't it be kind of a cool way for the expansion to end? For the big-headed, egotistical Asura, who, yes, may have fled from their original homeland to the surface, but now feel like they've conquered and they know everything. Wouldn't it be kind of cool for them to get knocked down a peg and be absolutely destroyed by Morgemoth? Yeah, that would be kind of cool. That would be an interesting thing that would then lead into a future expansion featuring, oh, I don't know, Primordus. Next question is from Tim Roberts, who says, do you think of the Jinn as a possible playable race in the future, and do you think Palawa Joker will make a return at some point? I am actually very tempted, now that it seems so clear that, you know, they've got Revenant coming, and then future expansion should just be extra races, extra races, extra races. I'm very tempted to basically look at, like, every minor race in all of Guild Wars 2, do a video on it and be like, alright, this is this race, this is what's cool about it, this is why it'd be fantastic to play as them. Here's why they won't be playable or will be playable, and like rank them all. Jinn would be a pretty cool thing to play. A long time off in the future. I wouldn't expect that until we were in Alona at some time, but yeah, it would be pretty cool. And there has been Jinnish stuff. You know, there are hints that even some characters we know are Jinn, because Jinn can disguise themselves, by the way, quite immaculately as people, as humans. So some humans, some people are like, oh, there could be a Jinn, like the guy in the Order of Whispers. And obviously we've got Zomaros and stuff. So yeah, maybe, and particularly with the idea of Palawa Joko, absolutely he's going to come back. He was the best villain they ever did. He trumped Shiro, he trumped Vizier Kilbron, and he certainly trumps the Elder Dragons. Yes, I think he's going to come back. Final question for today comes from Brinkle Hoof. Had a really weird question, which is why I picked it. They said, howdy WP, question for you. If you could take any video game, realm, or area and place it with Tyria, what area would you replace it with? So, for example, take out Tyria and put in Skyrim. This would mean you'd continue to play Guild Wars 2 as it is mechanically, but just in a different setting. So the opposite of this question is something more commonly that I'd be asked, and actually is something I've thought tons of before. So that would be, for example, if you could take Tyria, you know, the lore, the universe, but put it in a different game engine, you know, that wasn't an MMO, maybe more like a single-player game, what would you do? And my answer there would be super easy. It would be, oh, I'd love to take Tyria and put it in the hands of, you know, like BioWare and get something like Dragon Age or Dragon Age 3, but hey, it's Tyria and it's all this lore that I friggin' love. Or Bethesda, and you even mentioned Skyrim here. Wouldn't it be cool if instead we were playing Skyrim like a Bethesda single-player game, but the setting was Tyria? That would be amazing. I actually have, on my computer, a file called Guild Wars in the Elder Scrolls Fun Stuff. It was just something I wrote, like, a long time ago, of a whole bunch of different quests and mechanics and things I could conceive of if you were to do, like, a total conversion of Skyrim or Oblivion and turn it into some kind of, like, Guild Wars-based game. But yeah, so you're asking the opposite. The opposite would be, what universe out there do I love a lot, and I would want to see Guild Wars 2's mechanics so that I could play it again? This is a crazy idea. I think my answer would have to be a very old game I played that I feel like didn't get enough love. So any super old game that I really, really liked the setting, but it could do with that modern treatment, so I get like the Guild Wars 2 gameplay and stuff. And actually, as I was looking through a list of old games I've played, I've been trying to keep a list of like every game I've ever played recently, slowly adding to it. I actually saw, you know, even one that I played on the channel, I think the best answer honestly would be Azuric. I loved the setting of Azuric. I loved Parathia and everything that was in it. It was just a game that had a low budget and got cut short. So it would be really cool to see like a modern day interpretation of Parathia. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, crazy question. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll be reading them. And as always, take care, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.